I'm curious to know the the thought of the the really big. I think they're big. Maybe that's being subjective, but the and forgive me for that. But the retail presence on the street. Um,
You're talking about the width of the retail bays?
no, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about these really big, and forgive me, I'm using subjective
Okay.
commentary, but it's about the bigger columns relative in between the retail base. They're really big columns. Of course, you got to carry the mass above, but just wondering about the retail experience in relationship to these really thick and deep columns. And uh,
So we had
I don't
some,
know if that's a question, and maybe we can just kind of talk about that later. Um, I don't think that's a question.
I might say though, we looked at where does where does the line of the glass really want to live? Does it want to live nearer the face? It could. Um, or does it really want to live a little bit deeper, and maybe should it fold? With the kind of the scale and the presentation, if this was a series of retailers and maybe some of these are paired to become a little bit larger elements, we did like the nature of being able to see them as a space in and of themselves and really create almost time in moving from the sidewalk to the interior space. You know, we often see entrances to retail space that step back in for a doorway or step back in for um, an entrance. We simply carried that to the entirety of that display window, if you will, and gave it the opportunity to have some space, have some time.
Sure. One last question, and just thinking about this courtyard that's here in the on St. Andrews, what what's the magic on the width of the courtyard as presented now? And maybe help me understand what's going on, because I think in plan, this rendering's a little bit confusing. Where those palm trees are, is that a wall? And is there a first or second floor space? And
So,
then does a third and fourth floor step back? Help me explain what's going on here.
so a couple of things that are happening, and I don't know if anybody's ever tried to do this before, but I'm going to try to draw during this presentation.
I
So,
can see.
for legibility's sake, the street itself comes around and enters this courtyard. Um, but there is, you are correct in your observation. The retail itself wraps this on all sides before it steps up and creates a courtyard for the residences above. So it is multi-layered. And the sort of the scale and the position of that was really about, we wanted to be able to put and still have enough room for actual retail glass at the back of this space. We don't want to die into a dead wall, didn't want to die into somebody's home. So we've been fairly careful with just how far that goes so that we can create a meaningful relationship from what's happening inside the space to the outside of the space. The width um, really was we're fortunate to be open to the street, so we weren't overly concerned about pinching the space. At the same time, by not taking it too deep into the space and then transitioning up a level, um, how we just tried to land on what we felt was the right balance for light and air in that space. And you might even notice as we got deeper in, we opened it up a little further for the residences because we didn't have access to the street and that visual space. So we spent a good bit of time kind of studying what was right about that so that we could create the right relationships to the interior space as well. I mean, the space does face the east. We didn't, we won't get late afternoon light per se. So
Well,
we didn't want it too deep from the street. I think we were more concerned about its depth from the street maybe than we were really its overall width at that point.
that was my next question, solar orientation. I'm looking at some civil drawings, and this whole elevation essentially is northeast, more
Yes,
northeast.
it's slightly north, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. That's enough of my questions. I appreciate your insight into the process. Thank you very much. And again, I think there's been some pretty substantial shifts since the last plan we've seen them. And my questions were trying to get at some of the roots, but thank you.
I had one more question I forgot to ask about the site aspects. So I'm going to butt in real quick. Nathan, it may be a question that's deferred to someone else. What's the stormwater strategy? I know at the last meeting, I believe Dominic had mentioned something about underground tension under the building or the garage, but historically the city hasn't allowed that. So I wasn't sure what the latest was there.
So yes, our short answer is yes, we are planning an internally managed strategy, although it does tie into the stormwater strategy for the larger development. So we do get to balance the necessary improvements to storage for the project with capacity of the existing system and its ultimate discharge for the entire development. But our storage system will be within the footprint of the garage.
Conceptually, what's the storage system? I guess I didn't understand how.
So we're currently exploring one of two things in combination, Erica. We're utilizing more frequently, frankly, cisterns inside the first level. You won't see them from outside the building. They essentially live in the parking garage. But a majority of our projects where we have parking like this, we're doing a good bit of it above grade in cisterns inside the garage space. Our final calculations will tell us whether or not we have to do that in combination with some other subterranean system, but we don't have a lot of depth really to work with in terms of capacity there unless we create a vault. And I think we're at this point.
At least that was my question. Is the vault we have not been allowed to put vaults underneath any structures, whether it be parking or buildings, from the city. So that's why the cisterns make sense above grade. But,
yeah. No, okay. We anticipate being able to do the bulk of it, if not all of it, in a cistern strategy.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I think I just thought there he is. Nathan, this is Dinos.
Sir.
I was listening to your response to Jeff, and let me reiterate to what Jeff said so eloquently about the ongoing evolution and certainly the massaging of the project as you go forward. But I am curious. Can you talk to me about the architectural inspiration as it relates to the local contextual aspects of the area, what you have learned about this area of West Ashley and how it has been translated into the facades and the architecture?
Okay, so there's quite an eclectic collection of architecture in and around the area. And we, with what we're proposing, really sought to come up with sort of a playful way to create an openness that might be a little bit different, might be a little bit unexpected. We weren't trying to find something to match. And maybe that's a different way to say it. But even immediately adjacent, like the bridal shop has a kind of a uniquely southwestern kind of a shaping to it. We've got things just up the street that have these huge kind of flying roof forms and buttressed overhangs. We sought to do something a little simpler, and that too presents itself in a number of different places. I think we've got a unique opportunity to play with these openings, create a facade that is understandable, albeit different, and crafted in a way that allows it to be a little more free-spirited, a little more independent. We have talked about maybe we need to think through, is it finishing exactly the way we want it to at the top of the building? I think we've been able to achieve some of our major goals in the overall form in terms of kind of its presentation of how many stories is it on different sides, how open is it really. I think there's a layering of that detail we want to get into, but really maybe Dinos, what I would suggest is, I think in the crafting and the using of the facade in a different way, we're trying to play to the nature of, this doesn't, a lot of this stuff can utilize and embrace different things, and this started to reveal itself here, and we like what it's doing. I think there's probably some more obvious connections to things that are on the park side, but we're trying to build to the street in a retail and urban experience that is conducive and appropriate to the residences and the activity on the ground.
Okay.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Kristen, Andy? So
I had one small question, Erica, too.
Okay.
Could I see the map of where Chase Street is connected? David, thank you, or Erica. Someone was mentioning the opportunity of how Chase Street would improve this whole project. I was just curious of just 2 seconds of how do you get in and out of there? Is there a turnaround, or does it just connect all the way through to the other side?
So that's a fair question. So currently, Chase Street is little more than a driveway into a parking lot. We're proposing that it grows up into a street. Chase Street is also part of an access easement that we hope one day will connect to some planned park improvements. Those park improvements are currently being developed by the city, so we're working to set the stage to make that happen when those are ready. To be clear, the project is not dependent on the city park in any way. There's no access required to it. Rather, we're simply, like I said, trying to let the thing mature into a street, and the kind of experience we have for a street in lieu of driving through a parking lot to create an opportunity for the park into the future. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. And do you
Sure.
have like a projection of what kind of material you're going to use for that street? Is that going to be paved or
Yes.
concrete, or
It'll be a paved street. It'll have
just like a regular
curves.
street?
Yeah,
Okay.
it'd be very much like a regular street. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
thanks. Andy, I assume you don't have anything, but speak up if you do. Otherwise, we will move on to public comment period. I will start off with letters that were submitted, and then we'll move to the members of the public that have signed up to speak prior to the meeting. So the first is from Charlie Smith. And dear DRB, I am writing to express my concern regarding the second submittal of plans for the redevelopment of the above referenced site. I do not find that the second submittal is different in any substantial way from the first submittal for courtesy review that was made in 2020. I want to be clear that I'm a supporter of higher density and residential structures in the West Ashley area. Plan West Ashley has made it clear that higher density is needed and appropriate for our future development. What I am not a supporter of is intensive, overwhelming, and frankly ugly buildings being imposed on our existing streets and neighborhoods. There are many people in our community who are not convinced that the future vibrancy and viability of our community depends on having higher density housing closer and down to downtown that is affordable and accessible to all. How will we ever convince them that we should build higher density housing if the first example of what the density is going to look like is what you have before you today? There will not be support for the higher density development if this is the best the city is going to demand of the developer. What you have before you is a big ugly box that overwhelms its neighbors. This applicant, Grambling Brothers, control some of the most visible and important real estate in West Ashley. We cannot allow these improvement sites to be wasted on intrusive, ugly architecture. The applicant and the applicant's architect are capable of better work than this. Please vote to deny this application and advise the applicant to look again at the comments of the board from the courtesy review and to allow his architects to bring us their A game, not an ugly, overwhelming box. Thank you for your consideration. The second is from Ashley Jackrill. David, thank you for reviewing the comments the West Ashley Revitalization Committee had for the redevelopment project at the Ryans 829 St. Andrews Boulevard. To the extent that it is helpful and productive, feel free to share the sentiment. The group presented the project initially on a work group on October 30th, 2020, with a presentation to the Revitalization Committee at the November 4th meeting. The feedback from those meetings was taken into account when the work group met again on January 14th, 2021 to review the concept changes. The parking had been moved further back on the site, creating neighborhood benefits, including greater depth on the retail bays, which will in turn yield a greater variety in the amenities which will be supported and likely improve traffic flow. They also reduced the unit count, which was already below the permissible for the site. They've adjusted the design of the facade to appear less imposing as it sits adjacent to a single-story structure and a parking lot, all to create a project more pleasing to the community and at a cost to the development. These improvements were appreciated, and I look forward to the eventual redevelopment of the site. The third letter is from LaDawn Page. Dear members of the Design Review Board, I have previously, for reasons I have previously submitted strong opposition to 829 St. Andrews Boulevard, I write again to oppose. This project does not fit with the character of Sycamore Maryville, and there's a lack of infrastructure to support this project. I'm going to skip over what is not in our purview, such as use of the project, but she recommends project reuse and objects to things that aren't in her purview. That it's not a historic part of West Ashley with a community feel, and is injustice to those old residents to move forward with this project. And talking about infrastructure, some skip over that. And then the fourth one arrived after the deadline and from Pamela Ingram, but it's also regarding traffic and flooding, which is not in our purview. So with that, I will now open up the live public comment portion, and the first is Councilmember Shade.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy New Year to all of y'all. Thank you for the opportunity to address this board, and my appreciation to Nathan and Michael for the improvements they have made on this presentation. We have met with them. I think I've seen this presentation so many times I could probably do the presentation for you. Just give you a few comments from myself and from the West Ashley Revitalization Commission. As you know, I chair that commission, and the two folks, Ashley and Charlie, serve on that commission with me. You all have touched upon this, and I just want to sort of give you another overview, and sorry if I'm repeating myself from my prior presence before this board. But this project is very exciting for the city. It has great potential, as the comments you have made. There is an overall bigger scheme of this project to include what is now the used boat lot and used car lot on the other side of Sycamore and St. Andrews Boulevard. And it's important to keep that in mind. There's some problems with the tenant at CVS right now. So we're limited to only this aspect of this overall project and the grand scheme of this. Also, as noted on these slides, is Ackerman Park, the Charleston West Ashley Farmers Market. There's a dog park and a skateboard park on the tail end of that. And as Nathan has alluded to, part of Chase Street design and purpose is to tie into those projects behind that. So I mentioned this to you because the city's in the process of an overall scheme to enhance these amenities, which will benefit several members of our community, particularly those who live in West Ashley. In addition, as background information, this project touches literally on the tail end of Avondale, one of our oldest neighborhoods in West Ashley. And across the street from this is Magnolia subdivision. Then, of course, Ashleyville, Maryville, probably one of the most historically significant neighborhoods in our community. And so we wanted to make sure that all of this sort of blends into those neighborhoods and into the character of those neighborhoods. And I think that the redesign of this has made vast improvements in trying to address that. Some of the concerns, and David, if I could get you to look at move to slide number 19, I think it was. And this came from Katie Anderson, who's the president of the Avondale Neighborhood Association. Behind the bridal shop in the next one is a garage. You can see it. I think it's going to be I forgot the term of that, Nathan, but not a living garage, but a garage with vegetation on it. So there is some concern on the setbacks of the garage in those buildings, because not only is the bridal shop there in next one, there are also other residents that you can't, I don't think you may be able to pick them up in the very bottom left-hand corner of that slide. There are some residents, and I think Grambling owns one of those buildings, but Katie, Catherine, I should say, not Katie, she gets mad at me for saying that. Catherine Anderson did have some concerns as to how much that property will butt up into those neighborhoods, into those particular homes. There was also concern, and this was, I think, addressed by one of the board members concerning the sidewalks on St. Andrews. And this was presented to Nathan and Michael at our meeting on Thursday about trees and access on the sidewalk, because one of the huge issues, as you folks are well aware, is connectivity with other neighborhoods and having access along the sidewalks. And that was something that Bridget brought up to our attention as well. In addition, the county, this is such an important component and anchor of what is going on with this very dynamic part of West Ashley, because the bike lane, Greenway bike lane, is just right down the street from this intersection. And there's ongoing work with the county to improve the Sycamore St. Andrews corner and that bike lane Greenway access point as well. So we want to make sure that the project ties into all of these various moving parts. And I just want to make that aware, bring that to the board's attention as you're going through this, as to how this is not just something in isolation. This is a project that is going to be the starting point, and it's going to define and fit into all of these other moving parts of the Ackerman Park, the West Ashley Farmers Market, the dog park, the skateboard park, access to Avondale, and then the improvements we're making on the Bikeway, Greenway, and Sycamore St. Andrews. So I've said a lot. I didn't mean to regurgitate too much information that I may have repeated to you before, but I think it's just important as you take a step back and look at this to make sure that we've got all those pieces fitting into this puzzle and it all fits. And I really do appreciate the attention that Michael and Nathan have shown to us on this, and their willingness to work with us. It really is a good partnership, and I appreciate where we'll be heading with this. So thank you so much for allowing me to address y'all.
Thank you, council member. Next is Ms. Donna Jacobs.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the Design Review Board. The redevelopment of the Ryan site at 829 St. Andrews Boulevard has immense potential to showcase what revitalization can mean for West Ashley. Plan West Ashley spoke to the importance of mixed use when commercial sites at major intersections were considered for redevelopment. It is imperative that this project reflects the highest and best for this area. Here are my concerns. The architectural conversation between St. Andrews Boulevard, Ackerman Park, Chase Street, and the neighborhood of Avondale should be unique and respectful. And this is the expertise that I know this board will bring to this project. One observation in the current proposal is that the illustration of the sidewalk on page 9 and page 10 do not match. The design should be at least like on page 10 as far as the width of the sidewalk, if not greater. And the design here to me is quite utilitarian and in no way inviting for a conversation. This is an opportunity for very active engagement with the pedestrian, and the architecture should inspire this. Several practical considerations for the design is the lighting within the parking structure and along the project should provide safety for the residents and users, but in no way intrude on the park or the Avondale residents. Where is the trash collection on site and how will waste management trucks access this? Is this the function for the first floor of the parking area? Service access to the retail and offices on the first floor should be through the parking deck. And I was thinking of the parking deck at the Belmont for the businesses along Meeting Street as an example. Where is the loading area for moving into these apartments? Where is the access for fire and emergency vehicles for this complex? All of these and probably other infrastructure considerations should be carefully reviewed in order that properties along Avondale Avenue do not need to be used for these purposes coming further in the project. The community is excited about this conversion of the abandoned restaurant and current boat parking lot to a vibrant, exciting addition to the community. With your help, we can make it highly functional as well as beautiful for West Ashley, and we can set the bar for other developments that will follow. Thank you for the opportunity this evening to address the board.
Thank you so much, Donna. Next is Ms. Marcia Higgins. David, could you unmute Ms. Higgins?
Let's see here. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Marcia Higgins, and I reside in the Ashleyville community. My address is 970 Main Street, Charleston. I'm the president of the Maryville Ashleyville Neighborhood Association. Many of us are very happy to know that this area at 829 St. Andrews Boulevard will be improved with more housing and beautiful landscaping. This will improve the character and the beauty of this area. However, it is a concern that the 250 apartments is too many. It's too many because of the character of the Avondale area, and also because of the Maryville, Ashleyville area, as far as housing is concerned. The number of apartments should be decreased. In addition,
Higgins, I'm sorry to interrupt. We don't have purview over the specific use, but if you could tie it to the historic context of the neighborhood or the aesthetics or the design of the project, that would be appreciated. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
that's all right, thank you. And actually referring to the kind of housing that's in Avondale and also in Ashleyville. Having the 4 stories and 250 apartments would actually be out of the character of our community. In addition, your plan and design does not specifically address entrances and exits to this new complex. It does not address Sycamore Avenue. I hear you speak often today about Chase Street. Chase Street is like a path now. Sycamore Avenue is a major street. The main post office is located there. And I just can't see how you can plan such a development without addressing Sycamore Avenue, which is very significant because it will have to be used to enter and to exit this development. It will have to be used by the residents. It will have to be used by the customers of the retail businesses there. You speak often about St. Andrews Boulevard. St. Andrews Boulevard and Sycamore Avenue intersect each other. Mr. Shea just referenced plans and the city looking at that area. It's been a problem area for a long time. And I do feel that the developers of this complex really need to go back and look at Sycamore Avenue and involve that in your planning and in your development of this new complex. I understand that you don't deal with traffic, the design board and all, but the impact that this development will have on St. Andrews Boulevard and also Sycamore Avenue is significant. And I do feel that that needs to be looked at. How will it change this area? We have
Ms. Higgins, the technical review committee at the city works with regard to that. So if you want to speak with someone with regard to the traffic impact studies,
yes.
Mr. David Meeks can get you a contact after the meeting if you would like.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just want to say that we appreciate more housing and making this area more pleasing to the eye, more pleasing to look at. Because it's an area that's been ignored for years. And we appreciate somebody being interested in it and wanting to develop it, because it will improve our communities, our neighborhoods, and the West Ashley area. So please, if you would, consider the impact it will have on Sycamore Avenue and the significance of Sycamore Avenue for this development. I do thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak on this matter tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our public comment period is now closed. David, if you could please give staff recommendations.
Sure, thank you. So staff comment number 1, staff thinks the added improvements made to the revised design concepts are successful and more inviting to the public. The front of the building was pushed back from the street and given more room at street level. This also allowed for the addition of street trees and green space along St. Andrews. We like that the mass was broken up on St. Andrews with the addition of a front courtyard that opens up to the street with retail space and outdoor seating. We also prefer the rear of the building, addressing Ackerman Park and how the rear courtyard was opened up more towards the park. We like that the parking structure was pushed further into the building and away from St. Andrews, which makes the garages less visible from St. Andrews and allows for deeper and more functional retail space. This concept keeps all of the trees that are along the property line between the proposed building and Ackerman Park. The number of units were reduced from 250 to 238. I did also want to mention the landscape plan. There was some discussion whether this was a official submittal, but according to the DRB ordinance, a schematic landscape plan is acceptable, which we see this as schematic. So number two, that was number one. Number two, staff views this concept as very positive. The way the massing has been broken up, and we feel this is a big improvement from the last submittal. Staff suggests adding some ornamentation to the top of the parapet walls in the form of a cap or a cornice or some brick detailing. Number four, building lighting is encouraged, but DRB does not permit uplighting of the buildings. There was one rendering that showed some uplighting. The night shot showed some light uplighting of the building, which DRB does not permit. Number five, the added trees and green space to the front of the building on St. Andrews is another improvement. We recommend more green space in the front in the form of large movable planted pots at the base of each of the building pilasters along St. Andrews. If they could be irrigated, that would be preferred. Staff does recommend conceptual approval.
Thanks, David. Nathan or Michael, do you have anything, any comments or clarifications after the public comment period or David's recommendations?
Well, I continue to appreciate the conversation that's going on with this project and the feedback. We are working on the technical components, and we believe we have those well in hand. And so I just look for the continued collaboration and the continued advancement of the project. I think this is going to be a great thing for West Ashley and this site. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Nathan.
Erica, just two quick points. Number one, when I was listing all the folks we had met with, I forgot to mention that we had also met with Katie Zimmerman with Charleston Moves, and I'm sure most folks know her and what her organization does. So it's obviously very important to us to incorporate other modes of transportation for our residents and our shoppers and everybody. So, speaking to one of the lady who spoke a minute ago, obviously the traffic is something that we are committed to try to address and to to minimize the impact on that front. And so we're going to continue to work on that particular aspect of the project. And number two, in regard to Sycamore, even though I know we're talking more of a TRC type issue, obviously our plan, when the day comes, phase two of this redevelopment will incorporate a redevelopment of the entire shopping center. We're excited about that phase as much as we are this, and we know there will be other types uses that will be involved in that. So, our hope is that day is coming soon. So just wanted to talk about the Sycamore side of this too. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we are now in board
Chair,
discussion.
Yeah, it's the question, the applicant's one question, a little out of process, but it's in regards to Sycamore Avenue and perhaps the what might be a major vehicular connection between Sycamore and Chase Street. Right now, and there's the shopping center, and there's the road access that connects Sycamore to Chase. In the future phase plans, has that vehicular connection been maintained or one kind of in the general vicinity?
So
The question is there a connection from a mid-parcel connection between Sycamore and Chase planned?
I think, Nathan, I'll take that.
yeah, go for it.
Jeff, I think ultimately the way we redevelop that side of the project will dictate that. Certainly our goal is to have as much connectivity as we possibly can on that side. I mean, we see certainly a lower density type use as we as we kind of move from the multifamily site at Ryan's over to Sycamore. And so, yeah, our goal is going to be to have as much access as we possibly can. You know, at some point DOT gets involved. So curb cuts over on Sycamore are gonna ultimately, you know, they're gonna be involved here. But yes, we will certainly be pushing for more access off Sycamore rather than less.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I guess it wasn't fair to ask about what is in the future, but it is good to hear about connectivity as a goal. I guess what we could respond to is what's there in place now, that driveway in front of the parking lot, in front of the shopping center.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's nice. Yes. for the
Thank you.
time.
Okay, we're now in board discussion and a motion.
Well,
This is Andy. Dinos, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Andy.
I guess I'll start with the positive. I from my point of view, of course, is I do think that the courtyard that faces onto Ackerman Park is very successful, and I think it's moving in the right direction. That said, I think it's a little disturbing, I guess, to me to hear that the landscape plan as presented is, especially with all of the moving parts and as important as the landscape plan is, I mean, with all of these courtyards and that exists in this project, the street, how this faces the street, the patterns, just all of the detail that conceptually needs to be addressed and how this is going to be going on, that none of that information is in here, that is in a detail greater than a rendering, is disheartening. I don't feel like there's enough information here from a landscape architectural level to address. That said, from a height, scale, and mass, I just really feel like this building has not moved in a really direction that I can support from where we were at the last meeting. I still feel like it's a very alien to the environment. I am sitting right now, probably 2.5 blocks from the site. I am really supportive of the site being redeveloped, but I really think that how we move forward to that site and that redevelopment has to be the best, has to be this is what we're going to do in the future, and what we have here is not it. I feel like it looms over the properties around it. I just cannot see moving forward with the design we have right now. I may be in the minority, and I certainly look forward to my fellow board members' comments, and maybe I can pull something out of those as we move to a motion.
Well, and Andy, thank you. And may I also say to Michael and Nathan, thank you so much. I know that it's obvious that you guys have put a great deal more endeavor in massaging this design, and many thanks to Councilman Shade and Donna Jacobs and Mrs. Higgins and everybody that you have spoken with for their insight and vision of this property. I think is shared by all of us. We're excited about the possibilities of what could occur on this property. I think that we are certainly embracing the aspect of and understanding the density issues associated with it, and from an architectural standpoint can certainly appreciate the challenges that lie ahead. I guess my issue at this point in time deals predominantly with the architectural direction and the expression, and Nathan was very eloquent in his discussions, but there's a sense of place, a soul that truly exists in this area, that's Avondale, Maryville, Ashleyville, all of the St. Andrews homes that were here once. There's a phenomenal history with respects to what is this site and the impact of this site. And you unfortunately have the heavy, undesirable burden of being the first out of the gate. So consequently, from the board standpoint, my feeling is whatever is approved here will be the future model of everything that's going to be forthcoming. And it has to be great. It has to be unique. It has to be innovative. I was looking back at some of the comments that we had made previously and some of the concerns that were made during the courtesy review, the scale of the project, the facade height along St. Andrews Boulevard, the breaking down of all the facades, loosening up the site, which I think you have worked toward, the ability of the project to breathe. There was a comment that height, scale, and mass in Journal Architectural Direction at that time was not really the manner in which we had hoped it would be. There needs to be more innovation other than extruded boxes. We talked about the garage and can it step back? Our experience with green walls is one thing, but 4-story green walls, there's a lot of skepticism on the success of that. And I have great faith in this architectural firm and Nathan Schutte and what I've seen that Millen, Pasden Smith do. But I think that I would really encourage you to really dig deeper into what is the spirit of this area and develop it. You may be picking up the lines of the little bridal shop next door, but in truth, as I think somebody said, it's overwhelming it. There is a lack of sensitivity and relationship to the surrounding spaces. I'm still a great advocate that we address the St. Andrews Boulevard with a scale that's consistent and that will define a scale as we go forward. I think the sense of everybody with what's happening across the street with the storage facility and the height of that impact, even as far as setback as it is not a good sense of what's happening as far as this streetscape is concerned and what it could be. There are tons and tons, really, as Mrs. Jacobs and as Councilman Shade and as Mrs. Higgins stated, that dealing with service that are going to impact the design of this and could come back later on and create issues for us. So I am not in a position either to really embrace or even recommend a deferral of this project. But knowing the confidence that I have in this architectural firm, I feel certain that they will be able to find and capture the essence of what this community is in the West Ashley area.
I think this is a great, like I said, I still think this is a great improvement from what we saw before in terms of floor plan and site planning. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Dinos. I think to kind of build on that, it might be helpful to establish a 2-story maximum on St. Andrews to some degree.
Jeff, we can't do that from a board perspective.
Well, I'm not trying to describe a height, but I am trying to describe a mass and a scale. I don't want to be prescriptive on stories, but I do think that there is an appropriate context that is a mass solution that is not here. So I'm very aware of that's a zoning kind of text, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Okay.
mass and scale. And four stories on St. Andrews just seem to be overwhelming. I think that's what we had talked about last time. So I would encourage the applicant to build upon what we talked about in their courtesy review, and being a little bit more sensitive and thoughtful about the scale of the existing structures along St. Andrews. I see some of the precedent images that are in this package. I think there's just a handful of them. Go to that page, it's early on in the package, and I don't see any connection in scale or materiality to that middle image there. In Avondale is a good example, and think of it, retail on Avondale. It's not hidden behind big columns. It's not shadowed in already a northern facade that's going to be in shadow anyway. Yeah, I think of these places are a little bit, they're just expressed different, and I'm not so concerned about sharing my subjective opinion. I'm really just thinking about the success of this project and setting it up as a model, as we've all spoken of, what can be and what will be successful. I'm nervous about the building facade being on northern exposure, and from a retail environment, recessing that entry another 6 feet or 4 feet, or even if it's 3 feet, a recessed retail environment on a northern facade already contributes to kind of a dark experience. And I would just raise caution with that. And it seems like we've taken I think Nathan and his team have taken a pretty good look at looking at this from 15 to 20 feet in the air. I would love to see another layer here. I think someone mentioned that the sidewalks is a major component, and I totally agree. That in terms of community, the sidewalk experience, the pedestrian experience, that's what people are going to remember this by, other than, wow, look at that 4-story whatever. So if we can improve the 4-story whatever and then really focus in on the pedestrian experience, I think that would be helpful. So someone had mentioned the approach views, and I think that's a great comment too. What you see from the east and the west as you're coming in this. We've spent a lot of time focusing on what we see from if we're standing directly across the street from this property looking at St. Andrews, but I think the approaches along St. Andrews is just as important. I also think that mid-parcel connection is also important. We haven't really talked about that. This drive access is going to be extremely used, and we've not been presented what that elevation looks like or even much concern for it, other than it's the entry for the garage. So I guess there's good fundamentals here. I just think we need to build on what we're starting to do in plan and extract that vertically. I think we've gotten some good relief on the site plan. Now I think we need to find some more relief on the building.
May I add something that might help out a little bit, having lived here and understand it? There should be more of a casual and informal approach to the design. When you look at this area in West Ashley, and that's a very proud approach to what embraces the West Ashley, Avondale, Maryville area, scale, the informality, the casualness. The design is coming out very formal with a lot of formal statements. That's very urban. And I would encourage you to really spend some time just looking at this. When you look at the Plan West Ashley particularly, and all of the time and effort that the West Ashley Revitalization Commission invested into the endeavor of architecture, I think you're going to find that there is a much more casual and informal approach, and it needs to be embraced on this site. Now, there are certain instances where formality is probably warranted, but here I think if you take it to a more informal manner, which is what I think Jeff's implication was with regards to just looking at the scale on St. Andrews Boulevard and beginning to translate that back horizontally and vertically into the new building, it would probably begin to imply a lot of design language that could be embraced throughout the entire project. I don't want to overstep anybody else's comments, but I'd be delighted to make a motion. unless anyone has anything else to say. Well, in that case, let me preface the motion by simply stipulating that I have great confidence in both the developer and the architect to find the right solution, but this is not the right solution. So I would move for denial of the application and ask that the design team go back and look at all of the comments that were offered at the courtesy review and embrace them, and look at the comments offered today with the informality, with the casualness of what happens from a design standpoint in this community of west of the Ashley, and reapproach the design with a new spirit that hopefully will capture that that architectural solution.
I have a motion for denial with just some brief comments at the design team to go back and look at all the comments from the courtesy review and reapproach the design with a new spirit to capture the correct architecture solution.
It's a
Is
tough
there-
one.
Dinos,
It's a tough one to
Dinos.
second, but I would second that motion.
Sorry, hold on. Andy, what were you saying?
I was just asking if Dinos would mind adding to his comments that with the reapproach that the applicant come back with a richness of their presentation when it comes to more than just the building.
Yes, I'd be more than happy to include that as part of the motion.
And Jeff, sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying that it was it's a tough, it's tough. There's a lot of good things here, but I think they could be used as foundational blocks, but I think there's a lot of work to go in the massing, and I would second Dinos's.
Okay, thank you. So we have the same motion with an amendment, and Andy, I'm gonna need you repeat what you.
That the applicant provide additional detail and richness to their presentation beyond just the building.
Jeff, do you still second the motion?
I do.
Okay, and Dinos had agreed to amend the motion to include that. So we have a motion, we have a second. I'll now call roll. Kristen,
Yes, in favor.
Andy,
Yes, in favor.
and then myself, yes, in favor. So 5-0. Thank you very much, guys.
It's a great project.
Thank you, everyone.
Great opportunity for sure. Wow.
Great opportunity.
Mhm.
Is it just us now?
No.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You, Peter.
Thank you.
Well, good night, everyone. Yeah, there's no way of me ending the meeting for everybody but the board. So yeah, there'll still be people on here. Good meeting, everyone. Thank you.
Happy 2021.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you all. God, it felt like weeks or months since I seen you all.
It's been
I
a month.
know.
It
I can't
has.
wait to
Yeah.
be back together again.
We do. The restaurants are open. Let's do something.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all.
Should do that.
Great dialogue.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right, you
everyone.
guys have a wonderful night, and I'll see you
Good night.
soon.
You too.
Bye.
Good
And well
night.
done, Madam Chairman.
No, it is a team
Yes,
effort.
very well.
That is for certain.
Bye,
All
you
right.
guys.
Good night, y'all. Thanks.
Bye.